rakes per day to NRS sector, the non-power sector, as of now, against 350 rakes which are being loaded every day. Please give us 6-7 rakes more, and you will earn the gratitude from thousands of consumers spread all over the country. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Arora, for making the point of industry so emphatically. We turn to our last speaker, Sandeep Pai, who is going to be quite refreshing, I can assure you, but on a different subject.
Hi, I hope you can hear me. First of all, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me, Partha Bhattacharya sir, Yukumar sir, and Parthi sir. I mean, this is truly a very interesting opportunity for me to present a new topic. It also makes it very difficult being a last speaker of the day, but I'll try to keep it brief and also try to introduce a very important concept that is taking the coal industry by storm bit by bit. It's coming up. It was a non-topic 2 or 3 years ago, but now you see policy initiatives being undertaken about this topic. So before I talk about the topic, which is just energy transition, I think it's important to acknowledge what's happening in the world. In terms of, climate change is real, it's happening. It's happening everywhere. You see what's happening in Pakistan right now. Floods have devastated the country, and even if you can't attribute everything to climate change is a major contributor. You see, droughts happening in China, in Europe, and other parts of the world. And climate, as more and more emissions go into the atmosphere, you will see more and more, as the temperature rises, you will see more and more such frequency of events happening. This is something that is not just a view from some individuals or some scientists. There's a global consensus that sort of climate change is real, it's happening. And one of the major reasons why this climate change is happening is because of burning of fossil fuels such as coal, oil, and natural gas. Now, if that is the case, then naturally many people, many institutions, governments are thinking about how to achieve net neutrality, which is net zero. You hear this term more and more increasingly. Countries, companies, organizations around the world, both in developing and developed, are talking about, how countries can move away from fossil fuels. Now, within that broader context, now the big question here is, it's fine, in the long run, you can achieve all the, you can achieve low carbon transitions, you can move to solar and wind and others. But what happens to, in India's case, for example, coal producing regions? What happens to coal states? What happens to the railway revenues? Half of the railway revenues come from coal, which is subsidized. So essentially, this concept of just transition, and I will also talk about why it's also relevant even today in the Indian context, even though coal declines will not happen in the next 10, 15, 20 years. Coal is still real, it's going to rise in the Indian context, but it's still relevant. So the concept is basically, how do you make sure that workers, communities, coal-dependent regions, coal contractors don't suffer as the world is moving slowly but surely moving towards cleaner, low-carbon sources. So that itself is the concept of just transition, which is justice-based transition. Now, with this concept of just transition, there's a lot of things happening around the world. So I'll start with the global perspective, and then I will sort of distill down to the Indian context. So in global context, in United States, or largely in OECD countries, coal sector has been declining. Mining power plants are closing left, right, and center. Yes, after the war, Europe has restarted a few, power plants, but overall trend, they are moving towards gas, they're moving towards renewables. So as a result, governments and companies have responded by thinking about just transition policies, which is worker support. Like when you actually close down a coal mine, you want to make sure that no worker, no community member, or local revenues do not suffer. So you have to do that advanced planning. So this is something really happening around the world. There are coal companies like Eskom in South Africa who have set up a just energy transition office. They are working on how to repurpose coal plants. They are also working on making sure pensions are secured, etc., etc. So in the global context, this is a very pertinent topic, which is really at the center of any discussion on energy transition or net zero. Now, when you come to India, when you bring this concept to India, our energy systems are really dependent on coal. And by any study, you take the most green studies, or you take studies by international energy agencies, it's very, very clear that there is an upward trajectory for coal in the next 10, 15 years. And then it may be a bit flat, and then perhaps in the long run, we may see a transition away from coal. That is something which there is a consensus, but India at the same time has declared a net zero by 2070. So a net zero will typically definitely mean some kind of shrinking. It may not be zero coal, but it will definitely mean some kind of shrinking of coal, because carbon capture and storage, you can only have so much, because the whole technology is still at non-commercial stage. So in the long run, this will be a major challenge for states like Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, for districts that are dependent on coal. But in the short run, and we heard this all throughout and today from some of the speakers here, there's a real push and the need to make coal more efficient. So to shut down all the inefficient coal mines, and one of the speakers from Singareni in the last session was saying that some of the coal mines in the Godavari region will shut down. So mines are closing even today, even if the overall production increases. So just transition as a concept is a test case even in the short term when mines are closing, even if the overall production is increasing. And to this end, this is something that Ministry of Coal and others have recognized. Ministry of Coal is now working with the World Bank to create a mine closure framework, so that when they close those mines, the land is reclaimed, jobs are created locally, etc. State governments like Jharkhand are planning to create a task force on just transition to make sure that whatever mines close regionally, workers and communities don't suffer. So already action is happening. There's a lot of research going on in this topic. Lots of action is happening, but this is something I urge coal industry to think a bit more, because this is only going to grow. If you see what's happening around the world, this is a trend, this is a topic that is only going to grow. Now, so that's the short-term issue. The long-term, this is a big ecosystem. I mean, we all know that, from state and district revenues to we estimate about 40 lakh direct and indirect jobs. This does not include all the chaiwalas and everybody else that is in and around every coal mine. So this, from jobs to revenues to pensions to railways, this is a very big ecosystem. And so any decline in this sector in the long run will have serious implications on people. So that kind of planning actually needs a lot of, very, very advanced planning, and it needs decades of, a focus on diversifying those regions into other sectors, thinking about mine closures, thinking about, how to do this long-term planning. So this is why I think both in the short term and in the long term, this will be a topic of much relevance, and already we see so much policy action. So I just want to end by saying, in the short term, when we are only focusing on